All right, well, today we are back to work on the C6 competition drift car build. We've been knocking out a lot of the big, difficult projects on this thing. We got a few more to go, but we're cruising right along. We got a lot of things done. We got a lot of things figured out. It's at a pretty solid place so far. So we're just gonna keep on trucking, try to get some more work done. So what we're gonna start on today is mounting the radiator. So we got our fuel cell box built. We got this all mounted up. This is fixed in position. It's bolted in. It's good to go. We know where that is. We know where our diff is, and we know where our firewall is. So those are really the main things that we had to figure out before we started tackling mounting this radiator. All right, well, we got this thing mounted in here at the top. Really solid, really secure, but it's on rubber. So it is isolated. So we need to build something. I'm gonna try to build it to these existing tabs. If that proves too difficult because the subframe bolt is here, you know, we can always build something straight off the tank, but I want to build a bracket, isolate it with rubber, and then bolt through here to have kind of 2 points of isolation to hopefully prevent cracking. So yeah, let's give it a shot. Josue is going to start working on getting the fender arches in because these need to be in position before we can build the turbo kit. Since we had to take these off the other car anyway, we're gonna make these removable, which will be nice. If we ever get in a hit, we can just unbolt them, or if we ever wanna work on the car easily, you know, you take those off and you've got all the access in the world. Take those and the bash bar off and it'll be just like this, you know, with more stuff in here. So yeah, he's gonna work on that. I got my flat bar, see what we can come up with here. So we started measuring for our little brackets here. Now these I knew were gonna be a little tricky, and they were gonna be something where we had to kind of just start making it and see how it went, and if we needed to make any changes, we could. Since I didn't have a piece wide enough to make this all in one piece, we had to make it out of basically 3 little individual pieces. The main part that's gonna bolt to the radiator, and then the other 2 brackets is our legs to bolt it into the chassis. So we went ahead, cut our pieces out of this aluminum. It's so fun when you go back from working with a lot of steel back to aluminum because it's just so much easier to work with. It's easier to cut, it's easier to grind, it's easier to bend. So we went ahead and bent the 2 little brackets that are going to be our legs. Easy peasy. I mean, these things bend like butter even though they're pretty thick aluminum. And we started looking at how all of this is going to fit up. Now, the main plate I built was a little too big because it needs to go underneath the radiator on the back side of this tab. So we traced out a little general idea of how we could cut it to make it fit and get that clearance and cut it out on the bandsaw. Now, it was a little tricky to get this shape. It was kind of an awkward shape, so we couldn't get quite all of it on the bandsaw. What we had to do was cut 2 little tabs and then put it in the vise and break this last little piece off and then try to grind that notch that we wanted to go around the subframe stud with the belt grinder. So with all that done, put it back in place, and it still needs a little bit of clearancing just on this corner where it wants to make contact with the radiator. And with all that done, we got it to where we're pretty happy with it. So before I started making this into one piece, I went ahead and traced it out just so we have a copy for the other side because it works. And then we went ahead and tacked our 90-degree leg brackets on that we're going to use to bolt it in. So pretty simple process here. We just use the table's flat, clamp it on, put 2 tacks on it. It's always important to put at least 2 tacks in different areas on something, otherwise it can pull. So we test fit it one more time. That's definitely a huge part of fab work is you never want to skip the test fit phase because you might not test fit it and then you weld it all out and then you realize you have a problem. So we test fitted it. It fits good. We're ready to go. So we give it a good acetone wipe just to make sure it's as clean as possible. That is crucial on aluminum. I used to skip that step all the time and it makes a world of difference. And then we just weld it out. So it's a pretty small piece, so it takes heat pretty quick, welds pretty quick. Aluminum's just honestly really nice to work with overall. Once you know how to weld it, it's pretty easy to weld and it's just really not too bad. So we got that thing welded up, and then we need to drill our holes in it, our mounting holes and our holes to mount it to the radiator itself. So we went ahead and marked center line, got our holes punched so that we could start drilling them out and get them all drilled. Now I know I need a drill press, but I'm honestly so used to hand drilling stuff, it doesn't bother me anymore. So with all of that done, test fit it, put a bolt in it, fits perfect. Now, mind you, the radiator is touching right now, but we're going to put rubber under this bracket, so that should give us the exact amount of clearance we need. So we're building this with the radiator touching, knowing that it's not going to be touching once we put the rubber underneath it. So now we just need to make another one for the other side. So pretty much reverse process. We cut the main shape out that we had traced from the other side because we had already test fitted. We knew that was going to fit. Cut our corner pieces out, got those bent in the Swag Off-Road press brake. And just again, same old process: clamp them, tack them, weld them. So this all went pretty smooth. And I mean, it's not the nicest, most aesthetically pleasing looking thing I've ever built. So, you know, that was kind of a struggle. I normally like trying to make things look nice, and this was kind of more of a just get it done project. And it's tough for me. Midway through, I was rethinking my decisions, but you know what? It's just a simple radiator bracket. You're not going to see it. It just needs to do the job. So we pulled the radiator back out so we could drill our holes and officially mount the radiator. All right, mounts are made. I couldn't mark the holes with the radiator attached because obviously there's not a lot of room under the radiator. So I marked where they're going to go. We'll punch the holes, clean off the mark, drill the holes, rib nut. Bada bing, bada boom, we should be good. So Josue's making good progress, working on getting the rocker on. Have to notch it for the cage bar since it lands on the frame. We got a tiny bit more cutting to do, and then that's done. You got these on here. So we got 2 bolts here. We got big washers on the backside. We're gonna rib nut 2 up here in this corner, and then those will be done and dusted, and they'll be easily removable. 4 bolts. It's looking like a Corvette again. So we're waiting to finish this out until this is on, because once this is on, we can put the door on and then the fender on and see on both sides, see how everything lines up, make sure we've got this and that in the right place. If they are, we'll finish doing the bolts, finish mounting them, done and dusted. We're gonna pull it back apart because it's easier to work on without the body panels, but we need the body panels on to make sure that we're putting everything in the right places. So jibber jabber, pick this back up when we make some more progress. All right, radiator is officially mounted, very firmly affixed, rubber isolated front and rear. I'm pretty happy with that. Not my finest work, not the nicest radiator mounting setup ever, but it gets the job done. They're aluminum, so they're pretty light. We didn't add much weight, and it is solid on there. So really happy with this radiator mounting position in general, because we can build some ducting in here and basically come straight up off this to this lip here, maybe bolt it into the fuel cell mount, and then basically just come down here, hug the frame rail, maybe put a couple bolts in the frame rail, and I could probably bend it out of one piece, you know, a flat triangle and a triangle, and that would get us most of the way done to ducting and trying to keep tire smoke out of the radiator. So that'll be cool. The way they did it before in the other car, they had the radiator in a different spot, and they made these big giant shrouds here, whereas we really only need to seal the core. So the core is pretty much perfect in between the frame rails, so it's bada bing bada boom, seal it up. So that shouldn't be too difficult. That is a project for a later date, though. It's low on the priority list of getting this car done. It's not pertinent. So I do want to make some modifications to this radiator. It is going to have to come back out. I want to add a water neck up here as a fill point. That'll be higher than everything. Probably gonna cut this off, weld it shut. I may just put a cap on it. I have a cap. Same with this 10AN. I'll probably leave that just in case I do change my mind and want to run an expansion tank. So there's some things that we got to do to this radiator, but at least it is mounted. We're finishing up with the rear mounting situation. Fuel cells mounted, radiators mounted. We got to do things to both of them, but they both have a home. So anyway, jibber jabber, moving on. Body panels. So we've got this bolted in, so we've got a bolt here and a bolt here. We're gonna do 2 bolts down here, you know, one there, and then it'll be 4 Allen bolts. We can pull the rocker off, because if we get in, you know, someone door taps us hard, this is something that is in the danger zone and could most likely get cracked or broken. So it'll be nice to be able to easily change that. That's why I didn't want to panel bond it back on, because trying to get it off when it's panel bonded, woo! So all of the body panels we're putting on, that's why we're going to bolt them. So that way if they get messed up, Or in the front fender scenario, if we just want more access, we can just pop them off. So we're gonna go ahead and throw the door on and then throw the fender on, see how everything lines up, see if everything's roughly where it needs to be. Man, it feels pretty cool to see this thing coming together with body panels. Like, it's pretty wild how much of a difference it makes, you know? I've seen it as a bare carcass for so long, it's really starting to look like an actual car. So really stoked that all of this stuff lined back up. There was, any one thing could be wrong and basically none of this would fit. You know, this hood pin point is attached to this fender arch, so if this is off compared to where we cut the frame rail to match the other car to swap this bash bar from that car on, then that wasn't gonna work. Even if that worked, you know, I was definitely worried that if we didn't get this perfect and the fender wasn't gonna fit even close to right. So the fact that all this fits, we got plenty of adjustment in this fender. I didn't even, you know, we haven't even tried to align this yet. I just bolted it down. If this was actually mounted up like it should be, it all fits. So that's a huge, huge relief. And that's why we wanted to test fit them on before we finish mounting the understructure. So that's what we're gonna do. We need to finish mounting the arch on both sides, finish mounting this rocker, and then fit and cut and mount the other rocker, and then we're pretty much done up here. Now we do have a lot of work to do back here. The rear quarter bolts here, and then the bumper, the hatch lands on some quick latches from the bash bar, and that's about all the structure we've got. So we've got to build structure for the rear quarters and the rear bumper. So maybe we'll dive into that here shortly, but one thing I really want to do is start mocking up the interior. So it's really nice to see, you know, what kind of room we've got with the door in here, see the actual cockpit, not with this all, you know, kart style all open, and it looks sweet, man. I'm really happy with this. So I've got my seat rails that came with the car. They're a little different than I thought. I thought they were the same brand I had in my Vette a long time ago. They're very similar. But to use the hardware that I bought, we've got to open up the holes a little bit. So I want to get those fitted to the chassis, get the seats into those, and get the seats mocked up in here, and see what we're working with, see what seating position we can get, you know, where we want to put the column, if the shifter is going to be in an okay spot, where we want to put the handbrake in relation to that, because if we really need to build some sort of structure for the handbrake, whether we do a remote mount or what. So I want to kind of start figuring all that out, and it's just going to be kind of fun to put in some brand new seats and the seat rails and stuff, and see the actual interior of this thing, because I'm really excited about these seats. They're another one of those bucket list treat yourself parts for this car. This car has a lot of that. So yeah, let's get these seat rails fitted. All right, so this is the hardware I have. These are from Murad Industries. Those are the seat brackets I had before. So these thread onto the stock M8 studs. They space it up because that's kind of down in a pocket, and then they give you this big, nice stud. So these are super nice. I bought them thinking these were Murad Industries. They're very similar. The Murad ones I would say are a little nicer, but they're not. So this thing just doesn't fit. So we're gonna use the old carbide burr, open up this hole slot on all four of these. So we got some work to do. All right, so what we have for this car is kind of my dream seats. They're Bride ZEG 4 in carbon fiber. We're gonna have all the carbon in it, way more carbon than I've ever had in anything ever by a long margin. Carbon seats, carbon dash, carbon firewall. So I'm really excited to get these in and see what they look like and sit in them and see what it feels like. I did a Josue and I taped up the inside of the bracket so I don't scratch the seats up. Very nice. All right, check it out. Interior is set up. We've got our cockpit mostly figured out. We still have to do the pedal box. I use the tilt and clutch box to kind of space my feet up about where it would be, because with our pedal box, the master cylinders mount under your feet to give you more room to push it back. Now, in hindsight, with how far we shoved the seat back, we might have been able to get away with a normal, reservoir in front setup. But we won't really know until we go to mount that. Either way, totally fine. I like how it feels with my feet up there. I've got the seat angled back. I've got it shoved back about as far as it can go. So as you can see, we're gonna be way back in here. I mean, even the shifter is starting to get almost too far away. It's it's right at that borderline, and we have the longest step back we could get. So, the idea is the further back we're a lot of ballast, more weight over the rear tires. I mean, look how close we really are going to be to the rear tires. So really happy with this. Happy with the column where we've got the wheel. I've still got to pick and buy a wheel for this thing. I haven't decided what I want. I don't want to run my Clutch Kickers trophy wheels. I've already beat them both up pretty good, and my Texas ones, so we gotta buy a wheel. But it'll be around this size, both offset and width. So that gets us in the ballpark. Stoked, man. This looks snazzy. You can see the carbon from the side with the door open. You can see how much room we have with this cage. It's a snazzy unit. I'll show you it from this side. I like looking at cockpits from this side because you really get a good idea of it. You can see how far back the column is, and it's coming together, man. It's coming together. It's nice to see it with some parts and pieces in there. So everything's feeling pretty good. I've got an idea where I'm gonna mount the pedal box. I might try to test fit it in here, but I can't really tell where the pedals are without the master cylinders on them because they just flop around. I can't order the master cylinders till I determine which brakes I'm using, which I'm probably just going to reuse the Willwoods that came with the car. It's a nice setup, but I need to figure out what master cylinder size I need to order that for both the brakes and the clutch. The front, the rear, and the clutch. So anyway, I need to get on that so we can mount the pedal box. But handbrake. So in my Miata, I have a remote mount setup. So I have a handle. I have a big aluminum plate around the shifter with tabs, and then a handle. Viewer sent in this super nice lathed handle, and then a rod goes back, and I have the master cylinder mounted back here. It's real tight in the Miata, obviously, so I wanted to keep the master out of the way. I thought about doing a pull-up ASD like this, but this part would have to go about here, and then it's kind of right in my elbow range. Like, it's gonna get hit. I don't like this big bulky thing being up here. I don't like the idea of, lines coming out this high. I'm just not a fan of this. And I know it's probably silly. It's a freaking drift car, but I like clean, simple interiors. So I put some thought into this. So I'm going to do the remote mount. Now, what I got to figure out is what to use as a handle. This handle is way too tall. There's no reason I should be going from here all the way up to here, right? That's silly. It really needs to be about this tall. So what I'm going to try to do is take this apart. If we can use this handle, it'll be great because we can just build around this bottom spacer. Cut the top off, try to make it nice and clean. We're probably not going to get that mirror finish. And then maybe start trying to build a bracket in here. Let's give it a shot. I wasn't planning on tackling this project right now, but it'd be a good one to get out of the way. And if we can use this handle, we got the stuff to do it. So let's give it a shot. Save all this hardware so we can reuse it. This will make things a lot easier than the one I built in the Miata. That one, I had to weld this you know, a sleeve in here. It has to be the perfect size. If it's too small, then you have to tighten the nut down too much and pinch it, and then it doesn't want to move, so it's very tricky. So let's chop this thing and see what happens. So I started out by just doing a rough cut, like a couple little angles, trying to get some of the curvature, but I know we're going to need to do most of this in the belt grinder. So we went to the belt grinder, and like I said, aluminum is an absolute piece of cake to work with. This Ameribraid belt grinder runs through this stuff like butter. So we got it rounded off, honestly better than I could have hoped. It actually looks pretty uniform. It almost looks like it came that way. We didn't quite go for that mirror finish, but we got it pretty smooth, pretty consistent. That's what I was worried about. So now we need to start figuring out our bracket. So I know I need to make this out of something really thick. These handbrake brackets take so much more load than you might think, and you don't really realize it until you build a thin metal bracket, and then it just bends all the crap. So you gotta build them out of thick material. So we decided to use this thick 1/4 inch flat bar that I have. So we go ahead and cut it in the cold cut saw. This was the easiest way to do it. Keep a nice edge. Now it's always tough with the cold cut saw on the bench with a full length piece like this, because I had to have Josue hold one end to keep it all balanced, but we got it cut. You can see the handbrake handle compared to the old end, and it looks funny. It looks like nothing happened. It looks like I had two of them. I don't know why, I just get a kick out of that. So anyway, now it's time to work on our bracket. The handle's done, easy peasy. Bracket, gonna be a little more tricky. So we need to cut this 1/4 inch plate. This stuff takes a minute to cut through with the bandsaw. It's thick. Takes some time. You got to be patient. You just kind of feel like you're sitting there forever, just waiting and waiting, like some game show music's about to come on for the time it's going to take you to cut through this piece. Even in time lapse, it doesn't look very quick. It looks pretty slow. But anyway, we get these cut down to size. We're going for 2.5 inch on each leg, and we're going to make this basically a piece of angle. Now, if we had a piece of angle, that would be great. That would be a piece of cake. We wouldn't have to do anything, but we don't have a piece of angle. We have some flat bar. So cut the two pieces, cleaned them up on the belt grinder like we do with everything else. Trying to get most of the mill scale off. Some material you get, the mill scale comes right off, and you get it down to shiny bright metal. Some of it, you're going to be there for an hour trying to get the mill scale off. So we didn't get all of it off on this. I would have liked to, but we got it off where it mattered mostly, where we're going to weld it. We're just going to have to deal with it. So luckily, our fixture table is perfect for something like this, because we put a clamp on the front and a clamp on the top, and we've got our perfect 90-degree angle to tack this thing, and not only tack it, but weld it while it is clamped like this. If you know anything about welding, as you weld stuff, it moves, it heats and contracts, and it's really important to try to keep things in place when you weld them. So being able to clamp it in there and get most of the welding done, A1. So while I was letting that cool down, Josue needed some help getting these body panels on this side. So he's mocked up the arch and the rocker panel on this side. He's done the two mounting bolts, but now we need to do the same thing we did on the other side. We need to get the door on, get the fender on, check that alignment with the hood, with the other fender, with everything else, and make sure everything's in the right place before we go drilling more holes and putting more mounting hardware in. So we look at it a lot of times. We test the hood back on and off. There's a lot of adjustability in it. Everything looks good. A1, we're good to go. So he's going to go ahead and drill and riv nut and do his thing there. I go ahead and start taking apart my shifter plate that I made, taking apart the little bracket that I made to attach it to, because now we're going to have a new, much beefier bracket that we can attach it to as well. So I start mocking this thing up in here, trying to figure out where I need to drill the holes. It's a little tricky. It's not perfectly flat on that inside, so it took me a little time. I was trying to be lazy and not take the seat out, but I was like, man, these are brand new seats. I'm not about to drill holes and get a bunch of metal in there. And really, it kind of forced my hand, because I couldn't really get the drill in there because the seat was in the way. So I might have been lazy. I might have left it. But we go ahead and drill the holes out in the trans tunnel itself. We mock the plate back up in there again. So this was a tough thing to get right, because we need to get it exactly perfect, where once we cinch that plate down on top, it's going to sit flush against it, and it needs to be level for where the handbrake is and level left to right. So I took my time. I put magnets on there. I tried to transfer punch it, and it didn't work. The magnets aren't strong enough to hold it, but we got it done. We got the holes marked. All right, got my holes drilled. Got my plate marked, so I got to drill this out. So we got the rib nuts in here. We got them in this side here in the frame rail. So we've got 4 on this rocker panel. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Plenty. It's super sturdy. And then this one, we got 2 through bolts, and then these 2 should be plenty sturdy. We verified all the body panels fit. So, I mean, this is it. This is the last step of the first 2/3. I said 3/4 earlier. First 2/3 of fitting the body panels. All right. I'm gonna get to drilling. Yes, I know. I need a drill press. So we test fitted the plate back in there and the bolts lined up just as they should. So we decided to go ahead and weld the nuts on the backside. That was gonna make it way easier to install and remove the plate. Not to mention, if it ever did come loose in the car, we could just tighten it from the outside and not have to worry about trying to get in there with a wrench and take the cover plate off. That would be a lot more difficult. So we decided to just weld the nuts in and make sure it still fit. You always want to check again every step of the process that it still fits, and luckily it still did. The bolts went in. These are very tight tolerances, and everything went in good. Super happy with that. So we start mocking up where we're gonna put the handbrake so we can start building our tab. So we go ahead, cut some more big, thick 1/4-inch plate to start making the basis of our tab. So obviously we're gonna start with just some square-ish pieces, figure out our hole, and then we're gonna round them off in the belt grinder. So I go ahead and mark our hole with a punch just to make sure everything's in the right spot and it's where I want the handbrake to be, and then we just blast through both plates. Now you can see what a sharp drill bit does. This is 2 1/4-inch plates, so a 1/2 inch total, and it just blasts through it. So once that's done, we need to assemble everything back together. Now, the nice thing about using an already existing handle is we have all the right hardware. So what I'm trying to do here is basically set the preload. So it's snug, it doesn't have play, but also it doesn't have resistance. All right, got the seat back in here. How the seat rail's set up now, it's really easy to get the seat in and out, which is huge. If you've ever dealt with side mount seats, you know it's usually not that easy. Pedal box, literally it's a box simulating my pedal box. So the location of the controls in any car, especially a drift car, since you have so many of them, a shifter, a clutch, a steering wheel, a handbrake, pedals, etc., it's really important in how you feel in the car, how comfortable you are, how natural stuff is. So I'm trying to basically figure out exactly where this is that's a natural reach. So after a lot of tinkering, I figure it out. I'm happy with it. So we go ahead and use a magnet to hold it to the plate. We go ahead and tack our tabs in. Now I'm going to try to weld as much of this as I can while the handbrake's in here for that preload. So that way I don't weld them a little too close together or a little too far apart to where we've got to pinch them or to where there's a bunch of slop. We don't want either of those things. We want these things to be as precise as possible. So we check again with the handle. Everything looks as it should. Sweet. Let's test fit it back in, because now we need to figure out where we're going to cut our plate to drop our plate down on top of this. So I used the cardboard template and it was a little off, so I kind of offset the marks that I put on the metal plate a similar amount to where it was off, hoping that they would end up in the right spot. And after some drilling and some cutting with the body saw, which was it was on a little bit of a struggle bus because it had a dull blade and the compressor didn't have full pressure, but it didn't fit right. It wasn't quite where it needed to be. I mean, these really need to be precise since we've already drilled the holes in the chassis for the mounting bolt locations. So we can't be off any. It can't be crooked any. It has to line up with these holes perfectly. So yeah, we ended up having to open it up. We tried that, didn't really work, still didn't fit great, so we just made a big open hole, and I went ahead and welded these bolt holes shut that were into that little plate that I had before, because now we're going to drill them a little bit further inside. So I used an aluminum backing plate because then you can weld just to the steel. It's not going to weld to the aluminum. And then we throw the plate back in, we drill our new holes, our new mounting holes on this side into our handbrake plate, which just works out great because that was just a giant gaping hole before with really no structural support. We get our self-tappers in, we get our handbrake back in, which luckily fits just as it should, just the right amount of fitment, just enough room to get the shims on each side, which is always tricky. We set the preload on it, and what do you know? We've got a handbrake mounted. All right, here is the completed handbrake mount. Okay, it's not complete. We still got to make the rod to go back and mount the master cylinder back here. We're not done yet, but we got really the hard part out of the way. Super happy with how that turned out. It looks so good in there. Looks clean. I like the height of it. Location is great. Plenty of room to the shifter, plenty of room to the handbrake, and then to the steering wheel. Nothing's crammed, nothing's too tight. Everything's pretty much exactly where it should be. So I am really, really happy with that. I'm glad we took the extra time to do that. Yeah, so we'll have to finish that up, but it's a good start. We got the majority of the hard work done. So with that, we are out of time for today's episode. Really, really stoked to have 2/3 of the body on. So glad all of that went well. It feels cool to see it looking like a car, and we really need the arches in to build the kit, so that worked out well. Happy with the radiator mounting. good progress. So we still got to do the rear body panels. Might dive into that next. We're the turbo kit. I don't know what we're gonna do next. See how I'm feeling. But for now, that's gonna be a wrap. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Goodbye. One more look at it from this side. Oh, can't wait till this stuff's all painted. So good. All right, goodbye for real this time.